Please join us in welcoming TUI Group Executive Board Member of IT and Future Markets, Frank Rosenberger, and Co-founder and Chief Executive Officer of GetYourGuide, Johannes Reck, in discussion with Skift Senior Travel Tech Editor, Sean O'Neill.
Hello. Experiences are the part of travel that we all like and feel is the most memorable part of the trip. And the companies that we're about to feature now are going to drag experiences kicking and screaming into the digital era. We have joining us, we were supposed to have Tal from GetYourGuide, but at the last minute he fell ill and wasn't able to attend. So the CEO of GetYourGuide, Johannes, is joining us from Berlin. Thank you, Johannes. And we have Frank here from TUI Group. So let's start, Johannes, with you first, please. Give us some optimism, because I was having a conversation in the crowd before coming on, and Tamar Lohan, the CEO of Mr. and Mrs. Smith's Hotel, she was saying that I was asking, what is the theme that you're hearing today of listening into all the sessions, and she was saying it seems like it's cautious optimism with the emphasis on caution. And so give us some optimism, Johannes. How are bookings doing at GetYourGuide?
At GetYourGuide, I think we can strike the word cautious, and we can really flip directly to full-blown optimism. What I can say is that we started this year at negative 20% compared to 2019, so still relatively depressed, despite having invested for full 2 years into better selection, better product experience for our customers. And from those negative 20%, today we are more than double of 2019 volumes. This Sunday we will have our third all-time record in a row, surpassing peak season of 2019 and ramping up in what looks like an absolutely amazing tourism season this year. What I can say is that the hunger for experiences, among US American and European travelers is just purely incredible, and it seems like people cannot wait to get out. I'm personally right now in COVID quarantine, so I can fully relate to that feeling. I can't wait for our first trip, with the family at the Easter break and to go and book our great experiences. Yes, definitely. I'm also with you there. So Frank, as a publicly held company, TUI Group, going to report soon. He cannot share some of the bookings, but you can probably assume they're going to be broadly in line with things that we've heard throughout the day. So Frank, you have been leading, since 7 years ago, you joined TUI Group to lead a digital reinvention. When you joined, you had about 100 software engineers. Now you have 600 plus product managers on top of that. Plus you have the Musement subsidiary, which has another 300-ish software engineers. And when I look on the careers page for TUI Group, it seems like you're going to be staffing up for another couple hundred. So tell us, what is your strategic vision there with technology?
Yeah, I think for us at TUI, the digital transformation is the key asset going forward in terms of driving towards much better customer experience on the one side in travel. It gives the customers more choice, and also what we have seen is that we need to be able to drive that kind of change from the inside. There's so much knowledge in our business in terms of understanding customer needs, getting their feedback, so that we wanted to translate that directly into technology. And that's actually what we do. And it will provide much, much more choice. Yeah, and the choice will be, of course, around, I think, the basics of the holiday, which is, okay, where do I go? And I think it was really great also today to be here and to listen to people to, again, talk about destinations, because that's why we are doing that stuff, talking about the experiences, where Johannes is here. And then actually also, of course, bringing it there, caring about experimentation, and then bringing it to life. Yeah, and of course, experiences are a key element to make the most out of the holidays, because otherwise, sun and beach is great, but to do a little bit more it makes it fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So TUI Group, one of the things that under Fritz that you've done is you've you've become a powerhouse in luxury hotels, and you have really strong in cruise, and so you own the supply exclusively, which is part of the experiential differentiator in the offering. On the tech side, it seems like what you're doing, you're moving from 5 technology stacks onto one unified one called Trips. So give us a little bit more details. What is it that you're going to be able to do once you've reached a unified platform?
Yeah, I think the key element was when we had been on 5 platforms, they all worked great, yeah, in that perspective. So they were super performant and so no technical problems. However, when we actually looked into what we try to do, when we looked into a world of where you need to have hyper-personalization for our customers, for our consumers, then you need to do that 5 times. Yeah, and that was something where we said, oh shit, yeah, will that not be come then not only slow, yeah, but also will it not become expensive? And therefore we said, okay, let's think about it in terms of what do we really need to do, and what we wanted to, and what we want to build, and what we are building is in that perspective using the most modern technology in terms of bringing components together, doing it on a component base, so therefore that we are providing access to everything in travel. So therefore that we are the most open platform in that perspective to, of course, on the one side of our own content, like our own hotels, own cruise, own flying, but also to all the other hundreds of thousands of hotels, to all the other millions of seats, and to the experiences, and to be able to bring that for the customer together. And the key, therefore, for our platform is also the openness. That's a key objective going forward in terms of being open to bring the touristic value chain up to life in a personalized way for the consumer, and on the other side, of course, also to be able in a much better way than in the past to also work with other technology partners together. Because at the end of the day, yes, we have hundreds of developers. We will hire a couple of hundred more, and we are still on hiring. We had been hired through the whole pandemic. However, we all know there are so many smart people out, and we want actually to provide with our platform our abilities to connect to them, to work with them together, and to bring the best experiences to our consumers.
Okay. So Johannes, going to ask you a question here. So during the pandemic, a lot of consumers began to adopt a lot of digital technology. So the QR codes, for example, became more popular in Western Europe, and I can imagine it has really helped the digital first sales with GetYourGuide. When I've spoken with you and Tao in the past, you've said sometimes your biggest competitor is not another online travel agency, it's the tourist kiosk downtown. It's sort of like the old school offering. So I can see that that consumer technology adoption has helped in that way. But you do face a competitor with TripAdvisor and its sister brand Viator. Are you gaining market share against them, and what is your competitive distinction with them?
Sure, great question. And maybe so like to your first question, absolutely. My core thesis, from March 2020, to be honest, was that we will come out of this pandemic as a stronger and better company. And that is because there will be a huge push towards digital. In the new world of experiences, no one is going to queue up at the Eiffel Tower, the Vatican museums, or the Empire State Building anymore. People will book them on their smartphones, and they will want to have that digital companion with them, and they will be trained to skip the queue or to use QR codes and mobile tickets. And that was the key reason why we made the decision actually to not cut down our business too much, but actually continue to invest in technology, very similar to what Frank just said. In terms of TripAdvisor and Viator, fantastic company. I think they've done a really good job throughout the pandemic already over the last 2 to 3 years. We love to have good competition. I think it makes us better as a company. In terms of market share, I think it's difficult to say yet. The market is still very turbulent in this rebound. All I can say is, we are at this point in time 3x our pre-pandemic numbers in the US American market, which I think is their most important market and clearly gaining share. We are also rebounding as a clear category leader in Europe, which is the largest market for experiences globally. So we feel very well positioned But at the same point in time, we know it's day one, in this category. As Frank said, experiences is probably the next big thing in online travel post the pandemic, because it's the core cloth out of which the trip is made, and it's just not digital today. And we want to be that one brand that captures that experience online and that becomes that companion for the customer.
So TripAdvisor and Viator, they've done a more is more model. They seem to have a real tremendous quantity compared to what GetYourGuide has. They also have, in the past year, this new accelerate business-to-business model. Why is it that you feel good about your competitive positioning versus theirs?
I think it's a very interesting feature that they launched. It has definitely gotten a lot of buzz in the supply community, and I think it was an interesting timing for the feature to be launched. GetYourGuide has decided that we actually will not raise commission rates throughout the pandemic. Despite being bigger on average than TripAdvisor, Viator for the suppliers that we have, because we have a more curated offering than they do, we did not want to actually charge extra dollars in a time where most of our suppliers were struggling for survival. But instead, we actually went the other direction, and we set up a co-marketing fund where we co-marketed, our most iconic suppliers and the best attractions and the best things to do. And we've spent by now more than 10 million euros on co-marketing with our supply partners, where we help to re-energize their brands post-pandemic and give them more visibility. We're obviously on the GetYourGuide marketplace, spent multiples of that in marketing. So our approach has been a lot more to actually make sure that people come out thriving out of the pandemic, and that the entire industry is lifted up. And we have not placed too much emphasis on how we can increase our conversion or commission rate, through extracting more from the suppliers in the short term. I don't think it's the right point in time to do anything like that. Okay,
thank you, Johannes. So Frank, when I was preparing for getting to meet you in an interview, I was on the one hand startled by how much you're investing in tech at TUI Group, because it's a nearly 100-year-old company. I think of it as not being on the cutting edge of tech. So I was impressed on that score. On the other hand, I have heard about dynamic packaging as a phrase for, it feels like 15 years at various trade conferences. What is it that you're doing differently than what has been called dynamic packaging up until now?
Yeah, I think I would say dynamic packaging from a technology perspective is a long time a tick in a box. Yeah, so therefore, I think where we are going is actually to say what is really important in terms of being able to offer a personalized product is to say you have all the components really available, so that we have a kind of a broad inventory of the different elements you need for travel. Yeah? And when I talk about need for travel, I'm not only talking about the flights and the accommodation, which alone gives for many people a kind of a huge challenge in terms of combining them, but also about the experiences. And I think what is a key differentiator in terms of TUI is, of course, that we also own or control, in that perspective, a lot of these brands. Yeah, in that perspective, we have our own hotel chains. Yeah, and this is also for us a great test bed for new technologies. Yeah, and this is something which we can also bring then towards our partners in the value chain. I give you some examples like select your room. That was something we tried first in our own hotels, and then we said, okay, we make it available to our partners, and now every partner can actually join that kind of program. And it provides great value for the consumer, because it gives him the opportunity actually what he used to do in the plane for quite a long time, to say, okay, I can, especially when I travel with family, or I know the destination and I know the hotel, to actually choose what he really prefers. And we have heard it here with Miguel from Spain when he said, well, many people are coming now the 10th time to the same destination. Then, of course, you have a kind of a preference, and that's something we want to, this is what we understand with personalization. I think the next level will be, of course, that you had in the past, and also TUI had a lot of specialist businesses. Yeah, so it was even from it was about round trip businesses. It was about businesses even for people who catches fishes and stuff like that. But when we now have the experiences, yeah, also on that platform, so therefore we can create based actually on the preference of the customer choices, which we have never been able to do in the past. Yeah? And so therefore, we want to make that, of course, super easy for the customers online, but also, of course, for the people working in the travel agencies, so that they have a kind of one platform where they can mix and match whatever they need for the customer.
In theory, TUI Group is a great test bed for innovation, because what you were just saying is you're vertically integrated. So you own the hotel in much of your inventory. So you can trace from the customer, you bring in the customer, you have control from the demand and the supply. And so when you test things digitally, you can get a loop to iterate faster and learn and get better. So I guess I would go back to Johannes to ask a bigger picture question, something that came up earlier today when we were talking. My colleague Dennis was talking with Ariane of Expedia Group, and Seth was talking with Richard from Bernstein. And this question of sort of like multi-brand approach to sort of like a core competency. So on the plus side for GetYourGuide, you get really specialized at online travel agency sales for experiences, day trip experiences. You're not in multi-day, let's say, like we heard from Tour Radar earlier. You're narrowly focused, and so you're able to really specialize and perfect that product. But the knock against that would be, why aren't you selling hotels? And in the world, is the Booking.com, Amazon.com, everything model going to be what wins in the future, or is the specialty approach working? What is your view?
It's a fantastic question, Sean. And I've been in the travel industry now for 12 years, and it's I think a question where my views have really changed over the years. I think if we look back a decade, it was pretty clear that the Booking.com model, just kind of like having one brand and going deep, was the winning model, and that's how GetYourGuide got started as well. I think today there are multiple views on it. You've just heard Frank, TUI is approaching this with a much more holistic view, wanting to stitch together different components of the trip. That's clearly the direction that Booking.com and Expedia are taking. The way how I think about it today is that I think different strategies can win. The travel industry is a huge market. We are a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and I do believe that there is enough room for both the very specialized players as well as, I would say, the broader players. So in other words, I do think that Booking.com can become the Amazon of travel, while there's still a room for a GetYourGuide who's really specialized on experiences. And the way how I always try to frame it in consumers' minds is you have Amazon Prime and they offer videos and it's a massive business, but that's a small business out of Amazon's total business. And there's Netflix, which is a massive category champion just in entertainment and movies. And over time, even in Netflix, so GetYourGuide in that analogy, might branch out into other verticals, and you might want to test more things that are adjacent to your product category. But ultimately, for us, the answer is very clear. We think other people are fantastic at selling hotel rooms or vacation rentals in the case of Airbnb. That's nothing our brand can ever stand for. Equally, we don't believe that Airbnb can ever stand for experiences in the way that GetYourGuide does. That's really our core value proposition to the customer, and people come to us because they want to plan and book these unforgettable travel experiences. And that's really such a massive undertaking in itself, Sean. If you look at the tech, we just started to talk about this under the hood to make this happen. It is endlessly complex. We've been at it for a decade. We're not nearly close to being done. And things like personalization that we just talked about, it's just getting started right now. So I cannot believe that anyone else, as a side business, can replicate this, even if you have hundreds of millions or billions of dollars to put into this. It needs to be a core competency. It needs to be a focus, but it doesn't preclude other people from selling this as an add-on to the existing offering. And that's also where we play with our B2B offering.
Okay. Thank you, Johannes. Frank, do you have anything to weigh in on this sort of debate of is the Amazon model of travel going to work, or is the Netflix very specialized version of travel going to win the day?
I think first, people like that kind of term, Amazon of travel. And I typically say, because we are working here with Amazon together on the technology side, I would say, well, listen, if you're inside technology, I would say, well, you have the same toolbox. Yeah? So therefore, we are in that perspective there. And, but of course, we have technological flexibility. But when I look at it from a kind of a business perspective, I believe that horizontals as well as verticals have their role to play. Yeah, and I think they will all challenge each other. And I think it's also a little bit regarding what stage of maturity of a certain market is there. And I think we would say when we look at this that still tourism from a digitalization perspective is on its day one. Yeah, so regardless if you look at airlines, hotels, experiences, there's a long way from my perspective to go, and I can see absolutely, and I think that's also what we see, and therefore we are investing so much in mobile as well, still in web, in terms of giving the customers the opportunity to have the choice at their hands, yeah. So to drive it out of their mobile, supported with AI, because you have a kind of a limited reception area. So therefore, that we can actually be very customer-centric in that perspective going forward.
Mm-hmm. So it's still early days for personalization at scale. You also are doing digital work on things like up until the pandemic, I believe I had heard that about 60% of the calls that would come into customer service at TUI Group were related to the transfers, like, what time is my transfer, making sure that I'm going to get from the flight to the hotel. And now you can digitize that. You have a project called Hermes, I think, which is to get as much as that into via chatbots and automation. So
and that's also something which we have digitalized. So we have also worked with a partner together here to actually bring an experience to the customer where he can actually see where is my transfer. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so therefore that we can not only communicate it to the customer to say, well, listen, yeah, we know tomorrow you will unfortunately depart, so therefore your transfer had been booked at 10 o'clock, it will be with you at 10 o'clock. However, here is your link in your app, and therefore you can precisely see at 9:30 is the bus actually on the way to the hotel, how far it is away, and I think that has significantly reduced actually the 60%.
Especially if you're one of those 20,000 Germans who've descended on Mallorca at lunch hour, and then they go off and have a couple of beers, and maybe they missed the bus, and now someone else has to reschedule them. We have a couple of questions for you, Johannes, from the audience. Has the pandemic changed the types of experiences that people are booking? Are there any trends that you see there lasting post-pandemic?
Yes. So during the pandemic, obviously the destination pattern was completely lopsided. It started with people just booking outdoor activities, and then even in the cities, open top bus tours or cruises with open tops were very popular versus obviously small group tours, particularly if they were in a vehicle or not. We see all of these trends actually reverting back to the mean now. So, things are now again popular in the way they were before. But what I would say is that GetYourGuide has changed as an organization, because for 2 years we were so trained on domestic and regional tourism. We've greatly built out our supply offering in the European region and also in the United States. And we have just grown that new leg of our business, and that is still coming back roaring now. Clearly 2022 is still a year of more regional and domestic tourism in these areas, because we see international travel probably only fully coming back next year. Hence, I would say for us the overall mix has shifted a bit, but I wouldn't say that after the pandemic suddenly the travel industry will completely change or travel will be different. I think that is not correct. I think the trends that we saw before the pandemic, and that is digitalization of supply, greater experiences, and for us that often means smaller suppliers that actually create more unforgettable, interesting, unique, quirky experiences that are actually prone to be able to be personalized towards a specific subset of customers. Those type of things continue to thrive. And Sean, as you know, we have our Originals program, which really sheds a lot of light on exactly these type of special suppliers, and where we help them with data and insights to get a bigger customer base. And that's really the trend that we also see now post-pandemic. So no bigger shift there. I would say the one big behavioral shift that I have seen in the pandemic, and that has also surprised me, is the shift towards mobile. So GetYourGuide's transactions were roughly 45-50% on mobile, so smartphone devices pre-pandemic. Now we're up to 70-80%. So we've literally turned into what we did see in China in 2015, purely smartphone-oriented travel. And even for the longer term trips that you start to plan, they actually start now on our app and not so much on the desktop anymore. So that's definitely a trend that we watch very closely, and that also makes us think of what are the additional levers that we can pull now to really become an app-first business and not a web-first business anymore that we've been for the last decade.
Okay, thank you, Johannes. So Frank, let's maybe close on that note. Do you have any sort of response of what do you feel are like trends that are going to last post-pandemic, something that has emerged as a behavior that is here to stay?
I must say the brands had a perfect revenge. Yeah, so when you look at some of the flagship brands from TUI, they even had in 2020, when the travel was again possible, they started to have a fantastic time. Yeah, so therefore TUI Blue, Robinson, some Sensatori products, that's really something where customers, they understood it, they have the understanding of the brand promise, and that's what we really see going forward. And that also, when you look at the destinations, I think it's the same what we see. Those destinations who had done in the past a kind of an outstanding job, yeah, they are also the first ones actually coming back. And I think that's something, when we look also towards the summer, yeah, I personally expect that they will be they are extremely sought after. They will be very early booked out. So therefore, then there will be kind of a spillover also of other areas. But I would agree, we will have a great summer in travel.
Fantastic. That's a positive note to end on. Thank you, Frank. Thank you, Johannes, and everyone.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Ciao, Johannes.